Hello, folks. Sorry it's been a while. Had some severe asthma issues. Spring has not been kind to the lungs and the respiratory tract this year. It just seems to keep on circling back around. Haven't been feeling much like talking, much less reading, but after getting over now the worst of it, hopefully it's gone for good this year. I want to get back to reading good old the landmark Thucydides because I just got into it. I haven't read any of it while I was down. I keeping to my promise of reading this raw to y'all, just like the other books, and probably going to start at a third book as well. But so keep your eyes open for that. But I left off, I think, at paragraph 1.15. So I'm just going to jump into it. Last time we left off, Thucydides took us on a tour of the navies of the Hellenic peoples, ancient Greek world. Uh, It's talked about how there were never any wars on land, if I remember right, but there were ones at sea, and there was a uh, union of sorts at some point between Chalcis and Eritrea. Uh, and those are both, well, Eritrea is Greek. I'm not quite sure if Chalcis is. But I think that's where we left off at 1.15. So I'm just going to dive right in as per the way I set this up. I'm just going to read this raw, give my basic thoughts on it. Again, if this is your first time catching this, I'm not a classicist, but I do take Latin and Greek classes. Um, I'm an armchair historian at best, but I've only just gotten into the ancient world the past few years after doing Latin in Rome for like a year in high school 30 some years ago. So this is for anybody, um, classicist. If you're interested, if you want to correct anything I'm saying or thinking, please feel free. Um, but my thing is, I do this because I have social anxiety. Talking to a camera for me is weird. So this is one way I try to combat that. And second, I'm a blue collar worker. I'm not a college graduate. I love history. I love languages, but I've always struggled to learn them. Uh, not as bad as math, which I'm completely disabled at. Um, so I'm looking at, but I've always had the interest in history and archaeology in the ancient world and any history period. And I think, what if there are other people like me out there, working class people, the average guy who had an interest in this stuff but doesn't want to get into it because whenever you hear about the ancient world, you just hear about classical writers who were wealthy, educated, and maybe you think that, I'm not interested in that. Um, Maybe that's kept you mentally from wanting to get into any of it. Once I got into it, I liked it, and I still wanted to know about the average person, which I'll get to that in some other videos. But my thing is, what if you've always grew up poor like I did? You want to know what the average person in the ancient world is like, but all you hear about is Cicero or Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great. Nothing wrong with those guys. Um, I'm interested in some more than others nowadays. But what if you just want to know about stuff, but you never got into it for whatever reason? This is for you. This is for us to come together, read these things for the first time, digest them, take them in, see how different the ancient world was and how similar human beings are from then to now, but also how divergent. So, with all that being said, welcome along. I'm jumping into paragraph 1.16. I'm going to take this until I get tired of reading. Various too were the obstacles which the national growth encountered in various localities. The power of the Ionians was advancing with rapid strides when it came into collision with Persia under King Cyrus, who, after having dethroned Croesus and overrun everything between the Halys and the sea, stopped not till he had reduced the cities of the coast, the islands, only being left to be subdued by Darius and the Phoenician army. So it sounds like King Cyrus went on a bit of an organized rampage there. Okay. 1.17. Again, wherever there were tyrants, their habit of providing simply for themselves, of looking solely to their personal comfort and family aggrandizement, made safety the great aim of their policy, and prevented anything great proceeding from them. though they would each have their affairs with their immediate neighbors. All this is only true of the mother country, for in Sicily they attained to great, very great power. Thus, for a long time, everywhere in Hellas do we find causes which make the states alike incapable of combination for great national ends, or of any vigorous action of their own. So, there's a map here also that shows the Persian kingdom, the western portion of it anyway. And so they've got all of Anatolia, which would be like modern Turkey, um, and they've got a little bit of the upper northern and northeast part of Egypt. Um, and I guess this is around that time where Egypt starts to get conquered by a string of people, the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and so on. 1.18. But at last the time came when the tyrants of Athens and the far older tyrannies of the rest of Hellas were, with the exception of those in Sicily, once and for all put down by Sparta. For this city, though after the settlement of the Dorians, its present inhabitants, it suffered from factions for an unparalleled length of time, still at a very early period obtained good laws, and enjoyed a freedom from tyrants which was unbroken. It has possessed the same forms of government for more than 400 years, reckoning to the end of the late war, and has thus been in a position to arrange the affairs of the other states. Not many years after the deposition of the tyrants, the Battle of Marathon was fought between the Medes and the Athenians. 10 years afterwards, the barbarian returned with the armada for the subjugation of Hellas. In the face of this great danger, the command of the Confederate Hellenes was assumed by the Spartans in virtue of their superior power, and the Athenians, having made up their minds to abandon their city, broke up their homes, threw themselves into their ships, and became a naval people. Okay, that's. I'm not done this paragraph yet. That's astounding that the Athenians just called their whole city awash and okay, goodbye. We're hitting the seven seas, dudes. Goodbye. Because things were that bad for them that it was just better to just go en masse. And now that's got me wondering, like, how many of them went? Was it half of Athens? Was it the third, the fifth? Was it just the wealthy, uh, and their slaves, or was it the whole kit and caboodle? That's wild. This coalition, after repulsing the barbarians, soon after was split into two sections, which included the Hellenes who had revolted from the king, as well as those who shared in the war. At the head of the one stood Athens, at the head of the other Sparta. One, the first naval, the other, the first military power in Hellas. For a short time the league held together till the Spartans and Athenians quarreled and made war upon each other with their allies, a duel into which the Hellenes sooner or later were drawn, though some might at first remain neutral. So that the whole period of the Median War to this, with some peaceful intervals, was spent by each power in war, either with its rival or with its own revolted allies, and consequently afforded them constant practice in military matters and that experience which is learnt in the school of danger. I like that, the school of danger. Uh, it seems like where we are kind of right now. We're all sort of in the watchers in the current school of danger. But this is interesting. The Spartans had all the military power. They had most of the say in the Hellenic world at this point. They form a league with the Athenians, who by this point were a naval power or a naval city. Uh, but both of them now get experience in war, and it seems like at some point then they go against each other, and then they war with each other. So, okay. 1.19. The policy of Sparta was not to exact tribute from her allies, but merely to secure their subservience to her interests by establishing oligarchies among them. Athens, on the contrary, had by degrees deprived hers of their ships, and imposed instead contributions in money on all except Chios and Lesbos. Both found their resources for this war separately to exceed the sum of their strength when the alliance flourished intact. Okay. So it looks like Sparta just wants to own the Greek world just to own it, or because of some sort of uh I don't want to say master race, that's too modern, but like military superiority complex is what they've got going on. 1.20. Having now given the rest of my inquiries into early times, I grant that there will be a difficulty in believing every particular detail. The way that most men deal with traditions, even traditions of their own country, is to receive them all alike as they are delivered, without applying any critical test whatever. The Athenian public generally believed that Hipparchus was tyrant when he fell by the hands of Harmodius and Aristogeiton. They do not know that Hippias, the eldest of the sons of Pisistratus, was really supreme, that Hipparchus and Thessalus were his brothers, and that Harmodius and Aristogeiton, suspecting on the very day, indeed at the very moment fixed for the deed, that information had been conveyed to Hippias by their accomplices, concluded that he had been warned. They did not attack Hippias, but, not liking to risk their lives and be apprehended for nothing, they fell upon Hipparchus near the temple of the daughters of Laos, and slew him as he was arranging the Panathenaic procession. Okay. So the ancient world is really ritualistic, um, with their processions for their gods and goddesses. And they're saying they slew someone while he was arranging it. So not necessarily while he's doing it, but before then when he's getting it together. Uh, okay. To me, that's wild. It's like killing the priest while he's setting up for the Sunday sermon. But okay. I mean, if it was that important to kill, dude, okay. The only thing that they're not really given too much is why they wanted to kill him. But all right. There are many other unfounded ideas current among the rest of the Hellenes, even on matters of contemporary history, which have not been obscured by time. For instance, there is the notion that the Spartan kings have two votes each, the fact being that they have only one, and that there is a military company of Patane, there being simply no such thing. So little pains do the vulgar take in the investigation of truth, accepting readily the first story that comes to hand. So here, this whole paragraph just tells me that Thucydides is telling us uh, the things he's written, people might question, but what he wrote, according to him, is accurate. However, stories are going around, just like now, rumors, gossip, hearsay, and people just take them at face value. As for this thing with Spartan kings have two votes each, which would mean a king has more say in their vote than the average Spartan. And Thucydides is basically saying, no, that's not true. They each had one vote. So they're no different in terms of voting from anyone else, or at least the people who could vote in Sparta at that time, which I think were like landowning males. Uh, Anybody can correct me on that. I don't think it included women. Um, so he's giving you the two different ends of how history is and political maneuverings and anything in the human sphere is dealt with. When someone says something, they want you to take it as truth. But also, there are things that are just outright lies, but people will accept it with no questions asked. So, and on that, as a historian, he's pretty much spot on. We deal with that to this day. Um, so again, I am really liking this guy. I am grateful to my Greek instructor for suggesting landmark Thucydides to me. I'm going to go one more paragraph. That's 1.21. Wrap this up and package it into a video, and then we'll do some more next time around. On the whole, however, the conclusions I have drawn from the proofs quoted may, I believe, safely be relied upon. Assuredly, they will not be disturbed either by the verses of a poet displaying the exaggeration of his craft, or by the compositions of the chroniclers that are attractive at truths, or by the compositions of the chroniclers that they are attractive at truth's expense. The subjects they treat of being out of the reach of evidence, and time having robbed most of them of historical value by enthroning them in the region of legend. Turning from these, we can rest satisfied with having proceeded upon the clearest data, and having arrived at conclusions as exact as can be expected in matters of such antiquity. To come to this war, despite the known disposition of the actors in a struggle to overrate its importance, and when it is over to return to their admiration of earlier events, Yet an examination of the facts will show that it was much greater than the wars which preceded it. All right, so comparing this paragraph with the previous one, in 1.20, he drops a ton of names and just expects you to know who these people are, which means he's not writing for anybody down the road. He's not writing for probably not even the common people, or maybe he is, but he definitely expects you to know who these people are. So he's writing to his contemporaries. This is a historian writing to the people of his time because he knows that they would know these people. They'd have familiarity with them. He just name dropped a whole bunch of people. I don't know any of them because my knowledge of ancient Greek history is so. I need to look these people up, find out who they are. So that'll be shorts. So expect to see those coming. But then he claims that, this is the best he can give, the most accurate reporting he can give based on the things he's been told and the things he searched into. But eventually, so many things have become legend, even then you kind of have to doubt it. So he's given a warning, but he's claiming he's accurate at the same time, but he's also claiming that a lot of this stuff could be hearsay. So basically, what I got from this is, and I could be wrong, you don't have to quote me, is because I'm just giving on the spot opinions about this, they're just mine. He's saying to the reader, I've done the best that I can. I looked into it. I'm giving you the best that I can. I've parsed it as well as I could. And hopefully, this is not going to lead you astray. I like that. I like that whole thing. He's trying to give us clarity on his skill level as a writer, while also saying, nah, well. So that's 1.16 to 1.21. That's 5 paragraphs. I think I'll call that here. Um, we now know that the Athenians and Spartans had teamed up. Sparta was the biggest power in Greece militarily. It was subjugating the other ones, but they were there fighting against the Medes and the Persians. And then eventually the Athenians and the Spartans have a falling out. And then we get this cool thing about a bunch of names, a murder during a arranging a Pantheonic procession. And the accuracies and inaccuracies of history, hearsay, legend, and how things get blurred with the passage of time. I love this, and I'm still very early in this book. This is only page 15. And, this is a 600-page book, although I think a lot of it is footnotes and maps. So we've got a ways to go, folks. But I'm really invested in this. I hope you all are enjoying it. If you got any questions or responses, please let me know in the comments. If you are a historian or classicist and this is your bag, and any of my comments are hit or miss, feel free to say so. But until next time, y'all stay safe out there. Keep learning, keep reading, and keep growing.